Dearly beloved, welcome to Femme Fatale, because the name Final Girl was taken. I am your resident creature of myth, and for the purposes of our social experiment here today, your Femme Fatale, Abadonne, Kilbride, the Fourth. Feel free to call me DK to save time and much needed oxygen. Now, in this episode, and really in this series, I'm going to be talking about AMC's adaptation of Interview with the Vampire, in particular, Season 1. Part of the reason that I wanted to do this video is that it solves a lot of the problems that I do have with the original book series, and there are several. This is all to say that in this essay, I will be 1, climbing a hill, 2, declaring that casting black actors for Claudia and Louis does make a marked difference in the telling of the tale, and 3, potentially dying on it. Welcome to the party. First and foremost, before every goth on the planet blows up my inbox trying to argue that Anne was just being historically accurate, let me preface this in its entirety by saying that Anne Rice, despite everything, remains one of my favorite authors on the planet. I'd like to show you something. This is my copy of Queen of the Damned. As you can see, it has no cover, it has almost no spine left, it is just the paper. I have had this copy since I was 14, and I will be 32 in a month. I have carried it to 3 apartments across 2 states, and it is honestly one of my most prized possessions. People who know me know that I do not let books get in this condition. I don't even dog-ear pages, but this book is one that is particularly well-loved for me, and one that has been formative for me as a writer in understanding how to spin a tale over thousands of years. I adore her prose. I think her characters represent a great modernization of Rococo and Gothic beauty aesthetics, and the sheer depth of her mythology is something truly to be marveled at, particularly when you consider that Queen of the Damned is essentially the vampire Bible. I grew up reading her for pleasure. I still read her for pleasure, and I actually love the original film. I was so mesmerized by her vampires that it was a literal 6 watches before I realized it was Tom Cruise under there. So now you know that about me. That being established, me or anyone else for that matter liking her work doesn't mean that it isn't problematic, and it doesn't mean that you can't criticize the things that you like. We're all about killing your darlings here, so you and I, we're going to be here for a minute. I welcome you to go get a snack, get comfortable, and get ready to start where it all began, with Interview with a/the Vampire, depending on which iteration you're fucking around with. Now, because this is a TV show, I'm going to be breaking this down episode by episode. This is an adaptation that was crafted with an immense amount of love and thought, and I really want to take the time to do that justice. But you should probably have some sort of roadmap for what's going on here, so those episodes are as follows. It'll probably go here. Episode 1, In Throes of Increasing Wonder. Episode 2, After the Phantoms of Your Former Self. Episode 3, Is My Very Nature That of the Devil? Episode 4, The Ruthless Pursuit of Blood with All a Child's Demanding. Episode 5, A Vile Hunger for Your Hammering Heart. Episode 6, Like Angels, Put in Hell by God. Episode 7, The Thing Lay Still. We're going to begin, as most things do, at the beginning. Hey stranger, welcome back to Femme Fatale. I'm still Abadonne Kilbride. You are watching the second part of this video series, so don't forget to go back and watch part 1 and like and subscribe now so you don't miss part 3 when it comes out later. Make sense? Good, I'm glad we're in agreement. Now we can get down to brass tacks. After the Phantoms of Your Former Self opens in the present day, in Louis' Dubai-based Fortress of Solitude, with bisexual grandpa Daniel Malloy admiring a painting on display. Louis' assistant, the very same one who
objected to Daniel's changes to the original deal, melts out of the shadows to inform him the subject is Marius de Romanis, a painter of whose little work still survives. When asked about his relationship to Louis, the attendant says that he serves a god, and it is his honor to serve. As with many things in this series, it's not quite time to get into that yet, but hang on to it for later. We're going to put it in our parking lot right now, and then we're going to drive back around to it when it's relevant, okay? Daniel learns that Louis will join him at course 7 of his meal, which is an absurdly hilarious amount of food, and as he does so, he watches more and more attendants come to prepare Louis' place setting, with normal dinner accoutrement, saran wrap, and chilled blood poured into a glass soup tureen. At which point Louis thankfully enters the room. In episode 2, we pick up in the past in the immediate aftermath of the dark gift being administered to Louis de Pontelac. Last time, I forgot to mention the visceral religious imagery present in the scene in the cathedral. The idea of a gay vampire taking a dark communion on the altar of heaven itself is an image I think entirely befitting of Anne Rice's original vision, and it really sets the tone for the early dynamic between Lestat and Louis. So hold that image in your head while we talk and see if it changes anything for you in your watch through. Louis interrupts a line of haranguing questions from Daniel to start the next session of the interview.
2 vampires walk into a church. That's where we left off.
So, we pick up in a graveyard, where Louis' mortal body is dying. A through line between this adaptation, the film, and the actual text is Louis' retrospective disappointment at Lestat for rushing him through the process of dying and rising again, as though it's just something to move past rather than something to experience. Lestat keeps a brisk pace as he pushes the priest's body in a wheelbarrow and calls to Louis offhandedly over his shoulder rather than stopping to assist him as he stumbles through the graveyard suffering the death of his human body. Louis is confused and scared, and Lestat, who is meant to guide him through the process, is all business about the body disposal, and unnecessarily brutal with the body that he is disposing of, going so far as to break the legs of the priest so that he would better fit into the space in the mausoleum where Lestat was trying to dump him. As the season goes on, and the lovers do as vampire lovers are wont to do to each other in fiction, we're going to lose track of this amongst all of the other issues that arise between them. But I want to draw attention to it because this moment sticks with Louis for the rest of his unlife. As far as the end of next season, we see the ripple effects of this moment in his life and in his internal monologue, with the added bonus of context from Lestat later on. So I don't want us to forget this moment, though for now we are just going to pick it up and set it to the side until it becomes relevant again. By the way, the set dressing that opens episode 2 is the quintessential Anne Rice setting. A mausoleum in 19th century Louisiana filled to bursting with tombstones in varying states of decay and disrepair, statues of angles watching hawkishly in every direction, every freestanding surface absolutely drenched in hanging Spanish moss and kudzu. This is a direct translation of the flowery prose that I fell in love with when I was 14. And it's such a pleasure to see this level of understanding in an adaptation. It's present in Mayfair Witches too, but that's another video on another day. So, where were we? Louis dies. His body dies. And he rises. In the text, Anne refers to him as a newborn vampire weeping at the beauty of the night. And I think we can chalk his almost hysterical laughter as he sits there in the husk of what used to be his living body only moments ago as something akin to that. There's a nice little through line here as well of the angel statue that Louis focuses on in the 1994 film As and After He's Turning. It might sound familiar. The statue seemed to move, but didn't. The world had changed, yet stayed the same. I was a newborn vampire, weeping at the beauty of the night. Lestat takes Louis into the city to commit his first kill. And as they wander, Louis muses in the present day that his first night as a vampire felt as though he, now dead, was understanding the world for the first time. Present-day Daniel interjects to summarize, "You were fucking loaded." Louis sagely responds, "Beyond articulation." Lestat takes Louis to a pub to teach him to hunt, where he's drawn to feed on a sailor, but has his attention turned to an earnest tractor salesman who thinks they've brought him back to Lestat's townhouse for a sale. Louis attacks him almost immediately upon entering, while Lestat watches and offers helpful but ultimately apathetic direction. As Lestat is cleaning up later, we see a shell-shocked Louis sitting and trying to process the events of the night. He begins to panic, saying he needs to go home and check on his businesses and visit his sister, while Lestat cautions him that the townhouse is now his home. Not to be deterred, Louis shoves Lestat with his newfound strength, slamming him into a wall, which is the first incidence of domestic violence between them, but, spoiler alert, by no means the last. A stunned Lestat watches as Louis races out into the sun and begins to burn to ashes because Lestat has forgotten to tell him the main fucking thing about being a vampire after drinking blood, which is that the sun is fatal to them. Lestat rescues him from the front atrium of his townhouse and brings him inside, where he pushes a button and reveals a secret room that he keeps his coffin in, which is some of the sickest shit I've ever heard of. Sam Reed gives us confidence and this sort of rippling Adonesian grace that is all swagger and something we'll come to know and love about him, but there's also this beautiful undercurrent of excitement and nerves and affection in the softness of his tone and the subtleties of the facial acting that is happening. Louis is uneasy about sleeping in Lestat's coffin with him, but Lestat strips down to his birthday suit and slides into the coffin, promising that Louis can be on top. That seems to settle the issue. Present-day Louis remarks that Lestat rushed him through that first night as though it was something to get through. Death, rebirth, coming out, homicide. Too many firsts for one night. Before he can continue to wax poetic, Daniel reminds him of the truth, which is that his coming out wasn't so much a sexual awakening as robbing a little girl of her father and maybe a pet pony. This is one of the changes that I adore about Daniel in this adaptation. He's an active part of the story this time, not a passive listener or a tool to be manipulated by the supernatural creatures on the board. He forces Louis again and again to acknowledge the disparity between he and Lestat in those early years, rather than allowing him to remember the incident with rose-colored glasses on. Here he's interrogative and sure of himself, and unafraid of asserting his opinion or of any subsequent consequences for doing so. So Louis can't lie to him any more than he can lie to himself, which I think in turn gives us a wryer and more humble Louis than we necessarily got in 1994. Louis insists on going back to the family house for a party, where he and Lestat receive a remarkably icy reception from Louis' mother. Granted, it's rude as hell to bring an uninvited guest to somebody's house with no gift or offering in hand for the host, and Louis would have been raised to know that. But it's been a couple of months at this point in our fiction, and it's surprising that she's not relieved to see him in the least, even if she isn't happy to see him. Instead, she's bitter that he moved over half a mile away and hasn't visited for half a season, as though her warm and welcoming nature since the death of Brother Paul didn't drive Louis into Lestat's arms in the first place. Louis calls her out on not visiting him either, but she's what black folks like to call a come-eat mom, who meets his very valid point with silence. If you know, you know. He listens to her thoughts as she worries that her son has gone off and become a full-fledged gay, which prompts him to give up on that conversation and go visit his baby sister Grace. Grace, now married of course, is happy to see him and forces him to take off his tiny gay vampire sunglasses, revealing his once brown eyes to now be jade green and like a church window. News to her, if not to us at this point in the story. He gives her a huge wad of cash for her future children, and she tells him not to be a stranger or else, which is a humanizing moment that I think Louis desperately needs in a sea of abnormalcy. This is familiar. This is at least a routine he knows and a dance that he knows the steps to without having to wait for Lestat to tell him. The next scene shows us a different kind of normalcy for Louis. Returning to the question of racial disparity and why Louis as a black man continues to make an astonishing amount of sense, we catch up with him during a meeting regarding the new brothel he and Alderman Fenwick intend to go in on opening together. Louis attempts in good faith to converse with the man as equals, but predictably, Mr. Carlo and his stupid boating hat calls him boy, and expresses his distaste for the idea of Louis as the alderman's partner in this endeavor. He repeatedly makes microaggressive comments about Louis' intelligence and fitness to run a business, and I'd like to take a moment to comment on microaggressions. A microaggression is a statement, action, or incident regarded as an instance of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group, such as a racial or ethnic minority. Watchers of color will be very familiar with Louis' struggle in this moment. We watch him code switch in his best suit and know his business inside and out, and it still is not enough to earn the respect of a man who will never view him as his equal. Quite overt, as is much of what Louis experiences, but I would like what's about to happen to Mr. Carlo here to stand as a cautionary tale about writing checks your ass can't cash. Carlo taps Louis on his fucking head and pays him a compliment simultaneously, then goes to shake his hand while calling him an exceptional Negro. Black folks, y'all already know. As Carlo walks away, Louis thinks on the disrespect that he just let pass him by.
I had let them talk to me like that so long, I stopped hearing it. Yes, sir. Of course, sir. Subject-verb agreement, sir. Smile, nod, yes. I wasn't a man anymore. I was something else. I have powers now and decades of rage to process, and it was both random and unfortunate the man picked that night to dabble in fun.
We watch Louis stalk after Mr. Carlo in his fine linen suit, baring his teeth as he goes. He happens upon Mr. Carlo while he's relieving himself, and it's all in all a bad death off-screen for Mr. Carlo. Good for you, Louis. There's also an interesting moment a little bit later when Louis and Lestat are cleaning up Mr. Carlo's body that I think, again, many of us are familiar with. Louis tries to explain how Carlo's treatment of him drove him to the brink, but Lestat is a white man from France, with no frame of reference for the daily inundation of racism that Louis faces, despite being his immortal companion. It's a funny little commentary on interracial relationships and how sometimes the difference between what is experienced between the person of color and the experience everyone else is having are glaring to us and completely innocuous to our partners. Innocuous and inexplicable, often. In fact, Lestat reversed in this moment to calling Louis fledgling in his frustration, and in this moment Louis insists he stop using the word, which in his mouth sounds and feels like it means slave. They dissolve into swearing at each other and retreating silently to their separate coffins, where Lestat is the first to break and attempt to end the fight. His attempts at justification go unheard, and I think realizing that he's wrong in this moment, or at least that his response was incorrect and or unwelcome, he settles for contrition and asks what he can do to make it up to Louis. Louis promptly opens his coffin because you know baby girl has been waiting ready with an answer. He wants to buy the Fair Play Saloon. Lestat, of course, buys it for him. There's a lovely little walkthrough here in this next sequence where we see Louis as the king of his own little kingdom, and he passes the sex worker who hit a congressman over the head for going too far in the last episode. She is now dressed in a fine dress with her hair pinned up and addressed by all as Miss Williams, Louis having taken care to pay it forward to those who helped his last brothel succeed. It's just a nice little come-up for someone whose existence was previously fairly bleak and a little brutal more often than not, and indicative of the kind of person Louis is at his core. Louis then pays Lestat back in full. Good for you, baby girl. As Louis says, from 1912 to 1917, he made a mountain of money at the Fair Play, but had been negligent in his duties to his family. Grace is, of course, angry with him when he comes to visit and to see her new baby Benjamin, calling him out for not meeting her older twins and also for calling her ma'am. Grace doesn't like Lestat, but accepts Louis' situation, and even tries to ask how Lestat is. It doesn't go well, so she offers to fix Louis gumbo and has him hold Benjamin. But the sound of the baby's heartbeat is so overwhelming that his fangs descend, and when she returns, the baby is lying alone on the floor, and he is gone. In the present day, Daniel asks the real question.
Two questions. Did
Louis
you eat the
dances around
baby?
it, trying to distract him by feeding from a human named Damek who abruptly passes out from blood loss when Louis finishes, but Daniel's not to be deterred. Louis admits that he didn't, but was despondent after the visit and argued with Lestat about whether or not to stop seeing them. Louis laments not having a family of his own, and Lestat says that he's his family, and suggests a trip to clear their heads. He's already anticipated Louis' refusal and has opera tickets and custom-tailored tuxedos waiting for them, so they can bring Rome to them. This is one of the moments where it's so clear how much Lestat loves Louis, but also how good he is at anticipating and manipulating Louis, and also how well he knows Louis in such a short amount of time. There are a lot of complex emotions beginning to be seated at this stage in the relationship. This is not, of course, to say that this relationship is good for either of them, but we will get to that later on. Even Louis goes so far as to say, there was something about Lestat in those first years. Preternaturally charming, occasionally thoughtful. He was my murderer, my mentor, my lover, and my maker. All of those things at once. He didn't choose me to be his doormat. I knew he enjoyed it when I fought back, but there was present a kind of worship on my part. The earth beneath me always felt liquid. At the opera, Lestat bares his soul to Louis and tells him how he removes the centuries of loneliness Lestat has experienced. Lestat continues to say they must stay together, take precaution, and never part. Louis talks about how lovely the evening was, at least until the tenor, playing Ernesto and Don Pasquale, began to sing flat notes along with the beautiful, perfectly in tune soprano. This does not amuse the fop or the decadent monster in Lestat, who goes on to invite the tenor back to the townhouse for drinks, where he sits down and opens the score, correcting the tenor every time he hits a wrong note with an apathetic, "Wrong." Louis says, Lestat removed a lifetime of confidence, of joy, in less than half an hour, and he's right. Lestat is vicious and vitriolic in his perfectly accented Italian, dressing down of Ernesto, and seems to take exceptional joy in puncturing Ernesto's throat so he can't call for help or die quickly. Louis doesn't enjoy this, of course, and Lestat screams at him to live according to his nature as a vampire and kill his victims quickly, to kill them at all. Present-day Louis discusses a sort of meditation that he found in watching Lestat slowly bleed the tenor dry over several hours, listening to and watching Ernesto's life flash before his eyes. Lestat trying in his own way to show Louis the beauty of bringing death in all of its forms. I think this is his attempt to comfort Louis in some way, show him something intangible and perfect about the end they bring to their victims, and at least in the moment, it worked. We end episode 2 back in the present day with Daniel and Louis now on dessert. Louis has joined him in eating it after reading about it offhandedly in one of Daniel's books, which he's of course kept up with, and goes on to describe that it tastes like paste or chalk or soap to him. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Daniel muses that it was the dessert he had after he got clean and proposed to his wife in Paris, talking about a small imperfection she disliked that he adored about her. We pan out slowly over the two men silently eating their ice cream at the long serving table, Daniel having closed his laptop for the evening. Things are starting to get interesting. We're still seeing those through lines from episode 1 start to pull into episode 2. Tensions with Louis' family have not improved. They've only got worse since he has effectively come out in society, and there's no winning there. There's no solution where his mother is happy. Even if you were to end things with Lestat right now, today, I don't think his mother would stop blaming him for Paul's death, stop hating that she relies on him and that it means that she has to ask him for things when she dislikes her son at this point. The relationship between Louis and Grace is finally starting to see some tension as well. She took his weird eyes kind of in stride, but years later, after never meeting her twins, showing up kind of out of the blue, given how quickly time passes for a vampire, it's interesting to watch these frayed threads continue to fray as he goes. We're still very on in his vampire unlife, but still in these years where he is clinging desperately to what was human and real and organic about him, it's a struggle to interact with his family at all. Much more so than it ever was, even immediately after the death of Paul. And that's when we begin to really see Louis is something else now. He is other now. He is still Louis, he's still a black man, he's still a businessman, he's still a gay man, but he is also other. And it is beginning to separate him from what he once was in a way that I don't think Lestat took any kind of precaution to prepare him for. Lestat, on the other hand, having relentlessly pursued Louis and gotten him, turned him, given him the dark gift, and made himself his immortal companion, seems almost bored with Louis. And I'm sure it's frustrating that Louis is having such a difficult time taking to being a vampire. But when you explain absolutely nothing and let them go outside and get scorched down to, second-degree burns, they're going to have some complaints. They're going to have some things that they like to say about the whole mentee experience. And I think that that's entirely fair. Lestat, I believe, does love Louis, especially in these early years when he is still beautiful and flighty and new, and not nearly half of the tragedy that will eventually befall him is even on the horizon yet. And there is something lovely about seeing them in these early years. In the next episode, we're going to get into kind of rounding things out for Lestat and Louis and their situation together. And I really do think that for whatever reason it happens, which we won't get to until season 2, for whatever reason it happens, I think there is a world, there is a scenario where they get it right and they live out their happy little gay vampire lives, but this isn't it, and this is not the story that we're playing through. For anyone who doesn't know, Interview with a Vampire initially started out as a story about grief. As a story about grief and people who are left behind, and I will explain a little bit more about that when it becomes relevant, either in the next segment or the one immediately after that. But we do get hints early on of the direction that things are heading, and we see Louis looking for something to anchor himself to, as Lestat has proven to be functional in terms of information and teaching, but not forthcoming. It's an interesting situation, right? And then to have Daniel, who is a human, who has no dog in this fight, who has no reason to care what is happening in the least, who is the one who again and again comes to Louis and says, no, look again, no, that can't be right, no, what you're telling me can't be true, and forcing him to really confront himself in a way that he does not in the book, he does not in the 1994 film, and that he does not in this specific universe, this immortal universe, has not confronted at all in his lifetime. I love it. Obviously, this is a show that I enjoy a lot, and I just loved it more and more with every episode. I'm on my 4th or 5th rewatch of the series now so that I could write this series out, but it never feels old to me. I notice something new in each performance every time, and there's just such depth, and it's so multifaceted in terms of the whole picture that they were able to put together on screen for us. So I hope you're having fun walking through this vulgar garden with me. I love the Vampire Chronicles, and every time I rewatch the series, I'm reminded why. And I think that is what an adaptation is supposed to do. An adaptation is supposed to show you a different version of the thing you love, transform it in some way so that it's familiar and new at the same time. And I think that the AMC team, the Immortal Universe team, has done an incredible job of achieving that. Anyway, that's it. I'm going to hop off my soapbox. Just kidding. No, I'm not. Because, hey, you're still here. Might as well. Follow me on Twitter. I'm not going to call by the other name because Elon Musk can't make me do that. But I'm over there at Atrocity Kitsch. It'll be here. Yeah, I got the side right. It'll be up here. I mostly review whatever I'm binge watching or binge reading or binge thinking about. And most of it is unhinged nonsense about people dying on mountains. And no, I will not qualify that statement. I do other things on the internet than record videos. I have a tabletop RPG channel called Exquisite Corpse Presents on Twitch. We play multiple days of the week right now. We have a superhero game that is running on Fridays. It is an actual play, so we are playing it live with you, the audience, and things just heated up in a combat and an anti-mutant bill being passed. We're getting into kind of an X-Men 1997 sort of vibe. Things are getting really interesting. We've got about 4 episodes left, so come tune in. Otherwise, you can check out our YouTube, Exquisite Corpse Presents. Haha, multiple plugs in one. You can check us out there and see everything that we have put out, our entire catalog of games, which run the gamut, as well as our Pride events and our Juneteenth events from the last couple of years. So please feel free to check those out. And last but not least, before I shut up, at least for the time being, you can find me on StartPlaying. If hearing about tabletop RPGs was at all interesting to you, you're a very specific kind of person, and that's the kind of person that I want to know. You can find me at The Exquisite Corpse on StartPlaying. I run custom games, I run one-shots, and I run long-standing campaigns, of which I currently have 2 running. I have a long-standing D&D 5e homebrew campaign that is set inside of a storybook and populated with storybook characters, and I also have a weekly game of Magical Cowboys. It's Arthurian Cowboys. It's called Inevitable, and it is a great deal of fun and makes for some really, really dramatic, cinematic storytelling. And I'd love to run it for you, so you can find me there too. Okay, I think that's all the things. If it's not, I'll put it like here, or over here, or down here somewhere. I'll find a place to put it, and then I'll post it, and then you'll know the information and we'll be on the same page. Otherwise, I will see you next time for our next installment when we take a look at Is My Very Nature That of the Devil? Until then, I've been Abadonne Kilbride, and it's been a pleasure. No, wait, one more thing. Hey, one more thing. Are you listening? You sure? Jump in the comments. Tell me what you think about the gay vampire show and these specific gay vampires as compared to previous iterations of these gay vampires. I'd love to hear your opinions, unless you've got something homophobic or extremely anti-black to say, in which case I would prefer that you didn't. Thank you. I don't need that in my day. I'm trying to cleanse my pores, get in touch with my ancestors, better myself, and I don't need that kind of violence. So you can keep that to yourselves, but if you have something constructive to say, I'd love to hear from you. Okay, that's it. Bye!